Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're at the Abbot Marshlands. It's a beautiful morning. I'm out here with the Canon RF 100 to 400mm lens on my Canon R6, and I'm trying to get some video footage and still shots for you guys so I can show you what this lens is all about. Now, I held off from getting this lens when it was first announced because f8 kind of freaked me out. But now that I have it, I'm actually really happy that I picked this lens up. The thing is so small and so light that I'm now bringing a 100 to 400mm lens places that I normally wouldn't bring something like this, because my Tamron setup, while still being a lighter 100 to 400mm lens, it was still quite heavy. And this thing is really not heavy at all. It's so easy to carry around with me that that's really the huge advantage to it. Yes, f8 is limiting in terms of what type of shutter speed you can get if you don't have a lot of available light, but the advantage that you get of being able to really easily handhold a 100 to 400mm lens, the fact that the image quality is really quite good, the stabilization and autofocus are literally just straight up amazing. This lens, there's not a lot to complain about other than that f8 aperture and the fact that you don't get weather sealing with it. Okay, so this is why I love coming out here in the morning. I just saw two kingfishers chasing each other around, and I'm pretty sure I got a decent shot of one of them actually hitting the water, which I've never got a shot like that of a kingfisher. I've been waiting for a few years to try to get a shot like that, so I'm actually pretty excited right now. They're right around the bend of the river here, so I'm just waiting to see if they'll come back around. So far, I've seen a blue heron shoot up the river. I missed that shot. I wasn't ready for it. I do think that I got a decent shot of these kingfishers, though. So it's really a good idea if you're a wildlife photographer to get your butt up early in the morning and get out here, because there's a lot more wildlife and a lot less people, at least in New Jersey, early in the mornings. And this is another reason that I really do love the Canon RF 100 to 400. I mean, I literally just pointed, held down on my autofocus button, and bam, it locked right on instantly and just tracked those kingfishers as they flew across the river. Very busy frame, a lot of stuff that could have confused the autofocus system, but it worked perfectly. And that's one really huge advantage that I found with using the RF 100 to 400 is the fact that the autofocus and the tracking is so amazing with my Canon R6. Okay, so I've been out here shooting these two kingfishers, and I didn't realize it, but the tide is coming up and I'm losing ground quickly. So I'm gonna have to scamper myself back to where I came from here. Unfortunately, now I'm having to crawl under a bunch of trees. Hopefully there's no ticks. I got Lyme really bad a couple of years ago. Did not realize that the tide came up this quickly. Totally wasn't paying attention. And now there's really not much ground for me to get back to where I started. Oh boy. This is gonna be tricky. All right. Okay, made it back. That's crazy. I was sitting down there watching the kingfishers, got distracted shooting them, didn't realize the tide was coming up so quickly, almost didn't have enough ground to get back here. Okay, so let's just talk about the lens while I'm trekking myself up to the ridge. Now, it's not weather sealed. It's made of plastic. It doesn't feel as sturdy or as premium as, say, even my Tamron EF 100 to 400. But that being said, you have to consider all the advantages that you're getting. Yes, it's f8. That means that you can't shoot unless you have a decent amount of light available. Basically a nice, bright, sunny day. Even going into like cloudy days or going into like dawn or dusk, you're really gonna struggle with this lens. You're not gonna be able to get much over like 1/200th of a second without crazy high ISOs. Now, that being said, if you have a Canon R6 like me, I do feel that the high ISO performance of that sensor does mitigate that issue a little bit, but it's still something you're going to be battling with. Now, if you're willing to deal with f8, and you're willing to deal with the fact that, yeah, you're going to be shooting pretty much outside on a day like today, there's so many advantages to this lens, guys. Like, I just carry this lens everywhere with me. It's super, super light. It's even lighter than my 24 to 240 that I hike around with daily. The other thing that's really versatile about this lens is that it actually focuses really close up on subjects. So it kind of gives it an extra versatility in the sense that you get quasi kind of macro shots with it. So that makes it also a really fun lens to just kind of bring around as a one and done all arounder lens, even though you can't go wider than 100. When it comes to image quality, I find it totally acceptable. It's nice and sharp, bokeh looks nice to me, colors look good. Well, I do find that I think that the Tamron lens may have had slightly better image quality, being at f6.3, so the bokeh presents itself a little quicker. And I just might kind of prefer the way the colors looked from my Tamron. Overall, for the price, I find that this is overly acceptable. Now, the one really special thing that I find about this lens is the nano USM technology that Canon used for the autofocus. Literally just amazing. Like, instantaneous focus, silent, no focus breathing when you're recording video. There's literally nothing left to be desired by this autofocus system. The nano USM motors, literally awesome. If I see that a lens is using nano USM technology now, I basically know that it's going to be phenomenal. And the same thing could be said for the stabilization system. The stabilization in tandem with my Canon R6 IBIS works really, really well. And the one thing that other reviewers mention that I do notice too is when I'm recording video, I have to half press down on the shutter, and that seems to make the stabilization kick in and work really, really smoothly. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to work quite as well, but it's not like a bad thing, it's just something you gotta be aware of. It's a little weird. Now, overall, I think if you want a 100 to 400 millimeter wildlife lens and you don't want to spend $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, this is pretty much the lens you're gonna go with. Super sharp, great autofocus. Yes, you're sacrificing aperture. Yes, you're sacrificing weather sealing, but those are really the only two downsides to it. So when it comes to overall construction of the lens, you know, it's not great, it's plastic, but that's what keeps it light. Overall, it feels very rigid, very sturdy. It doesn't have weather sealing, so, you know, it's not an L lens, it's not L lens build quality. If you've used any of the other RF lenses, the quality's quite nice, and it's basically the same as all of those. Now, once you get past the fact that, yes, f8 is a very limiting aperture, and yes, you do not have weather sealing, everything else about this lens has been very, very good. I find the image quality to be very sharp, and while yes, f8 might not allow bokeh to kick in as fast as my 6.3 aperture on my Tamron lens, I still find the overall bokeh, when it does present itself, to look very, very nice. Okay guys, so I think you can see where I'm going with this review. Basically, I love this lens. Yes, it has some bad things about it. No weather sealing, and an f8 aperture that's going to be limiting to the amount of light you can get on your sensor, which of course, without an appropriate amount of light, like outside in a bright day like today, that's going to limit the shutter speeds that you're going to be able to use before the ISO destroys your images. So, you know, you got to weigh the pros and the cons. For me, having a lens that can zoom out to 400 millimeter, but also be this light, means that I'm going to bring this thing along with me at a lot of places that I wouldn't have brought my other telephoto lenses, and for me that's a huge win. Mixed with the fact that it's decently sharp, the autofocus is good, and the stabilization is amazing, I'm going to say that I actually love this lens. It's probably going to be the telephoto lens that I use the most until I save up and get that 100 to 500. Anyway guys, I think that Canon hit it out of the park with this lens. If you're in the market for a budget telephoto zoom lens and you have one of Canon's R mirrorless bodies, I say this is really a no-brainer. Pick it up. I think you're going to love it. Image quality, stabilization, and autofocus are next level awesome. While you are going to have to deal with a limiting aperture of f8 and you're not going to have weather sealing, everything else about this lens is literally awesome. Go ahead and pick it up, and I think it's going to make you really happy. Anyway, guys, if these videos help you, do please think about going below, subscribing, and clicking that notification bell. It really helps me to be able to make more videos like this for you.